Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. Welcome today to a brief review of a Pagani that I picked up in the last big sale. I dubbed this one the Mission to Alaska when I featured it in my top 10 list back in March, and it's not hard to see why. If you took a standard Omega Speedy and then combined it with a Speedmaster Alaska project and an Omega X Moonswatch mission to Mars, it would end up looking pretty much like this Pagani. Which is no bad thing. I think it looks really good. This is the Mark V Pagani Speedy and they have come on leaps and bounds since the original. In fact, the original was so bad I refused to review it. I waited until the Mark III. This one has, I hope you're sitting down here, a sapphire bezel insert and cost the princely sum of $85 US. It's amazing what you can put money into when you're not spending it on design, eh? Let's flip the camera and have a look at it. Okay, bit of a quickie today because I have essentially reviewed this watch before a year or so ago. I bought this one because of the colour, and I think if you haven't picked up a Pagani Speedy yet, perhaps this red and white colour scheme will tip you over the edge. I paid for the small box. I have no idea why anyone would pay for the large Pagani box, especially because you get the legendary blue polishing cloth with the small box. Behind that you have the watch in glorious red and white. Now I say red and white, it's kind of silver, there you are. It's kind of white from some angles and it goes silver from others. Perhaps not as white as I would have liked it to have been, but yeah, it does have a bit of kind of a chameleon character to it. It does change colour depending on the angle, depending on the sun. I'll pop in some more outdoor macro shots a bit later on. So yeah, sapphire bezel insert, a red sapphire bezel insert on a Pagani for $85 US. What is the world coming to? Really nice set of dimensions on this one, 42mm in diameter, just like the original Omega. Just under 14mm thick, I measure it at 13.8, but with a shorter lug to lug than the original 47.5, much more wearable therefore. 20mm lug width, there's a 2mm taper down to 18, back up to 20 at the clasp. Sized up for me and my 7-inch wrist, it weighs in at 137 grams. The case finish is far nicer than any $85 watch has any right to be. Fine brushing on the mid case, high polish on those Omega-esque twisted lugs. It's a high polish bezel. You've got that sapphire insert, and that is a piece of double domed sapphire crystal. I believe there's a little bit of kind of blue anti-reflective undercoating, doing not a bad job in my studio lights. Yeah, you can just see a little bit of blue purple around the edges. Believe it or not, that is a 5-link bracelet. Those are all separate pieces. 3 are brushed, 2 are polished, and it has female end links, again helping it wear quite nicely. Solid end links, it's just push pins holding all together, but then again it is a relatively affordable timepiece. Then we get to the clasp. Oh dear, it's the standard Pagani clasp, their name in landscape across the top, high polished chamfered edges, mostly brush finish, double security pushers, 3 holes of micro adjust, pressed upper, milled lower, but it's got the Pagani diver's extension. Why Pagani? Why do you insist on doing this? Nobody wants a diver's extension on a space-themed watch. How do we know it's a space-themed watch? Well, there is a clue on the caseback that's as subtle as a house brick to the face. Looks like it was drawn by a 6-year-old. It's a rocket on the moon and oh my goodness. Anyway, screw down, stainless steel, 100 meters of water resistance. The crown screws down, the pushers do not. I think this one would be fine for taking it into your swimming pool, but you're probably not going to take it saturation diving anyway, are you? The movement is a VK63 by Seiko 3-register chronograph. The subdial at the 3 o'clock is a 24-hour indicator, arguably the least useful of all sub-registers. It's a second hand down there at the 6. Always nice to have a quartz with a small second. You don't notice it's quartz nearly as readily, and it is a 60-minute timer over there at the 9 o'clock. This one has been running for about 5 minutes to this point. Start, stop, and reset. All pretty straightforward stuff really. 3-year battery life. Now that is assuming you are using the chronograph for 1 hour per day. It's a $1 battery. You can change that yourself, no problem at all, and you might get longer than 3 years out of each battery if you don't use the chronograph all that often. Plus or minus 20 seconds per month is stated accuracy. Let's have a look at the dial and hands and let's get it back outside and under macro. Again, this watch is far better looking under macro than any $85 watch has any right to be, I think. It's clean, it's interesting, and it is legible in a way that the original Pagani Speedies simply weren't. Have a look at that hands, the hour and the minute hand with black surrounds. You immediately can pick them from a distance, no problem at all. And I love the Alaska Project sub-register hands, those big red hands at the 3 and the 9. Everything's just printed on, the indices are not applied, but everything's very crisply done. It's the Pagani logo underneath the phallic symbol at 12, Pagani design and chronograph in red. The only other text on the dial, Japan movement either side of the little baton index down there at the 6 o'clock. Now there's a minute track with third of a minute markers printed around the outer edge. Not quite sure why they did thirds, because this being a mecha quartz, it is actually capable of timing down to 1/5 of a second. The 3 sub-registers are nicely recessed and there's some concentric circle work in there for us. And it's all finished off by a red chronograph hand and the red sapphire peso insert. I'll say it one more time because I'm not even sure I believe it myself. On wrist it wears really nicely. I've got a 7-inch wrist for your reference. And by the way, heaps of spare links, so I reckon 8 1/4 inch wrists catered for, without resorting to leather or rubber, no problem at all. And there we go, white, silver, white, silver. Perhaps if it had been more overtly white, it would have looked a little bit cartoonish. Maybe they had gone for a silver dial to give it a bit of maturity. Perhaps the red is enough colour on there without them going overboard. Sits neat, sits flush, just under 14mm thick though, is not particularly slim. At least a mil of that though does come from that domed sapphire crystal. Yeah, it looks good and nicely legible. If I take it further up, the anti-reflective undercoating really helping here in the studio, and the black surrounds on the main 2 hands really helping as well. But I've got a little bit of a treat in store for this one. A colour matched Barton Elite Silicone. I bought this last October, November I think for a Seiko I had. The Seiko didn't make the grade, the Seiko got sold, so I think it has now found its new forever home on the Pagani. Looks good, wears nicely, a bunch of fun, sensible movement under $100. But I do have a few moans and a few niggles, as always, of course. And of course, I'm going to start with loom. Pagani loom is crap. There are other ways of putting it, but they're probably more offensive than that. As I said earlier on, they have got the phallic symbol at the 12 o'clock, but as soon as I turn the speed up on this, it disappears. Within minutes. It's just rubbish. The caseback is so obvious and so childish that it's a little bit patronising and almost a little bit insulting. And while the bracelet itself is perfectly serviceable, the clasp lets it down. As I said, why do they put divers extensions on watches like this? Pagani don't seem to learn that just a simple clasp with a decent level of micro adjust is all anyone would actually require from this watch. It doesn't feel good in operation, it's a little bit insecure, and doesn't sound particularly nice as well. But I have to keep reminding myself that $85 barely buys you a strap code bracelet. This one, you get a bracelet, you get a whole watch to go along with it, and yeah, a ton of fun in that colour. If you don't fancy the red though, they do one with a black bezel that does look a little bit more like the Alaska Project. As with any purchase on Ali, look for the cheapest price you possibly can. If it's not on sale today, it'll probably be on sale in a couple of days' time. So there you have it. If you haven't already bought one of these speedy lookalikes, perhaps the red and white will be enough to tempt you. You certainly get plenty of watch for your cash. If you don't fancy this one, why not check out the original copy? How's that for an oxymoron? Or their Daytona lookalike instead. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you all again in a future video.